Hi there, welcome to the Adley 2022. Today we're going to go ahead and take a look at Adobe Illustrator. This is Adobe's vector program. This is what we're going to be creating today, an infographic. So all of these different pieces and parts we're going to show you guys how to generate step by step. There's 10 steps that we're going to go over today in total. The first step we're going to go ahead and do is creating a new document. So we're going to go ahead and go up to New. If you guys launch Illustrator, you're going to get the same interface and you'll see this page that pops up. So here is all of the different types of documents that we can create. These are all presets. And what we're going to do is go over here to print. Once we've selected the print option, we should see letter pop up. You will notice that all of these are in points and not in inches. And we can easily change that over here on the preset details by go ahead and click on points and select inches from the drop-down menu. Now, this works great if you're doing something that requires very specific measurement types, or if you're given a preset of certain measurements in different formats that you can pick from which ones you'd like to use. You'll see that this changes it to inches right away. We do want this in the landscape format, so all we gotta do is click on this right here, and that will switch over. So now we have an 11-inch width. We do not need to worry about bleed today. Today we're also going to look at our color modes. If you plan on printing something out, you should always be designing in CMYK. It is going to present the colors in such a way that they look more accurate to what will actually be printed out on paper. Whereas if we were to select RGB, which is for monitors, phones, TVs, etc., this would offer, a wider range of colors, and also things like neon and other colors that you can't actually print out with various preset inks that are in a printer. So today we'll go ahead and use that so we can have a broader spectrum. You'll see this right here pop up, letting you know that you're selecting something that's not meant for print. The last thing we're going to go ahead and do is take a look up here. We're going to change the title of this document to Saguaro Life Infographic. Once we've titled our thing, we can go ahead and click Create. So this screen is going to be the interface for Adobe Illustrator. And you're going to notice there's going to be a lot of commonality between here and Photoshop and several other programs that you're going to see throughout the Adley. On the left-hand side, this is where our toolbar is. So these are all the different tools that are available to you, which we'll go over more and more in depth as we go along. If you do at any point wonder what some of them are, if you hover over them, they will give you a little preview of what that tool's purpose is. So that way you always have that option. Up here is our tool-specific settings. So depending on which tool we have selected, this will change, and you'll notice that as we're working. And up here on the right-hand side is our Layers tab. So here's where we'll be able to organize all of our documents. Or at least all of the parts of our document. Over here, this big white box in the middle of our page, this is what we call our artboard. So this is the dimensions that we had plugged in when we created this document. So anything that we print or design that goes beyond the edge of the white would not show up on the printed document. This is just additional design space. And if I zoom out, you can see there's plenty of space to organize thoughts and everything else around the actual document. Up at the very top here is our top menu bar. So up here are other actions that we can take. And also under Window, you're going to find a variety of palettes that we will be using today. Let's move on to step 2. Okay, for step number 2, we're going to go ahead and be creating our background. Now, unlike Photoshop, we can't just fill the artboard with a color. We actually have to create objects. Illustrator works a lot like using pieces of cut paper and basically stacking them in a variety of different ways in order to create the effects or the images that you guys want. So in order to do this, we're going to go ahead and be using the rectangle tool, which is right here on your toolbar. You can either click on it or go ahead and press the letter M on your keyboard, and that is the hotkey for that tool. Now, the rectangle tool works in 2 different ways. I can click and hold. And you can see in the bottom right, there's a little gray box, and that's telling me my width and height of my object. And that's one way to do this. I'm just going to hit delete to get rid of that. The other option is if you just go ahead and click once on your artboard, it will open up this dialog box. And in here, we can actually plug in the exact dimensions we want. So it's very, very specific. So we can go ahead and set our width to 11 inches. And the height of our artboard is 8.5. So we're going to go ahead and click OK. And this will generate a rectangle that size. You'll notice if I look over here in my toolbar, my fill box is white, my stroke is black. So that's why we have a little black border around it. You'll notice also this blue line that appears around the object with these little white boxes. This is called the bounding box, and this also identifies which objects are selected at any given point in time. So what I want to do is be able to move it. Now, I can't really do that using this tool, so I'm going to go up here to my selection tools. I have two of them. As far as being able to move things, I have my selection tool, and I have my direct selection tool. And you can see here in the preview, they function a little bit different. So the black selection tool that we use at the top, we can go ahead and click on an object. And if we click and hold, we can move that object wherever we want. But this will select an object in its entirety. Now, direct selection allows us to select specific parts of them. So for example, these little corners, these little boxes that you see are called anchors. So these anchor points are basically where our lines are connecting. Because in Illustrator, our objects are defined by mathematical equations, not the pixels that you would have in Photoshop. So when I go ahead and click on this, I can change the location of it in that one specific area, unlike the black selection tool. Once I've done something, if I don't like it, I don't have to click and move it back like this, because there's a good chance I might be off. So to undo our last actions, we're going to go ahead and hit Command Z, and you'll notice it'll step back. And then if I do it one more time, it'll step back one more time. So Command Z is going to be your best friend. It doesn't matter how long you've used this program. I guarantee you're going to want to know that one. Okay, so the next portion of this step, we're going to go ahead and be adding color to this object. Now, there's a couple ways. The easiest is we're going to open up our swatch library, which is where all of our colors are stored. So we're going to go up to Window, and we're going to scroll down, and you're going to go to Swatches. Once you click it, you're going to get a little box that looks like this. So this is the palette for swatches. So on here, depending on which is in front, you'll notice I can select, have the stroke in the front or the fill in the front. Whichever one's in front is the object that I'm going to be changing the color of. So in this case, we're going to click on the stroke. We're going to say none. And then we're going to go up to the color. And then we could use any one of these colors to fill. Now, let's say this isn't exactly the color I want. I can either go in and change it there, or I can go over to the toolbar right here, and you'll notice this. If I double click on here, it will open up my color picker, which allows me to very specifically pick what color I want to use. Or if, for example, I'm doing work for someone and they have a hex code, it's right here. I can plug in a hex code and it will give me the exact color that is relevant to that particular item. So in this case, I'm going to pick a color that's a little bit lighter. And once I've done it, I'm going to go ahead and click OK. So you'll notice that it shows up here as well. If I want to save this color, like I'm going to use it later on, I can click and hold on this and simply drag it down, and it will add that color to my swatch library. All right. So following that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to be creating our footer, and we're going to basically repeat the same step. We're going to go ahead and click on the rectangle tool. And once we've clicked on the rectangle tool, I'm just going to go ahead and click one more time. We're going to set our width at 11. We're going to change our height to 2. And we're going to go ahead and click OK. So now I'm going to select with my selection tool, and I'm going to place it where I want it to go. Now, because it's the same color, it's a little hard to see. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to assign it a fill color of this navy blue for the time being. Okay, let's move on to step number 3. In step number 3, we're going to go ahead and be creating the mountain range in the background of our infographic. To do that, we're going to go ahead and be clicking on the pencil tool right here. You'll notice that any of these that have a little triangle in the bottom corner means they have additional tools. So if I click and hold, you can see some of the other options that are available. As far as creating the line work, we're going to go ahead and double click on it, and we're going to select a more accurate path rather than a smoother path. So depending on how we trace with our mouse, it's going to either follow it extremely accurately, or it's going to smooth it out for us so it's not quite so jagged. Once you've done that, go ahead and click OK. Now, in order to do this, obviously it's not rocket science. You can just sort of create any sort of pattern or shape that you guys want. The one thing you are going to want to do is as you go to the edge of your artboard, we are going to circle all the way around it. Just like that. Now, these are both marked as they have none. We're going to select the stroke and give it a color so that way we can at least see the shape. Otherwise, it's going to appear transparent and we won't actually be able to visually see it when we have to select it later on. So I'm going to use the selection tool. You can see now we have this tracing of our mountain range. What we're going to be doing is using a tool called Pathfinder, and we're going to be taking a copy of the background and this new mountain range, and we're going to create what's called a clipping mask. And it's going to basically make sure it fits perfectly to the frame of the artboard. So to go to Window, you're going to scroll down. You're going to select Pathfinder. Now, once you've selected Pathfinder, we're going to need to select our objects. Now, the thing about Pathfinder is you need more than one object. It cannot use a single object. Now, we are going to create a duplicate of our background because we don't want to lose it. So you lose one of the shapes when you use Pathfinder. So we're going to duplicate this background. So we're going to use the black selection tool. We're going to go ahead and click Command or Control C, Command or Control F. And all that does is it creates a perfect copy. So you can see if I move this now, I have two copies. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Command Z and move it back. Now that I have one of them selected, I'm going to hold the Shift key down and I'm going to go ahead and select my mountains. Once I've done that, we now have both parts. We're going to go over here and we're going to select Intersect under Shape Modes. When we click this, you're going to see it snaps to being exactly the shape of the artboard at the bottom. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to assign this a color now. We can go ahead, we're going to get rid of our stroke now that we're going to fill it in. We're going to select Fill, and then we're going to go ahead and pick a color. You'll notice that your mountains are now in front of your footer, the blue bar that we created at the bottom. So in order to move it back in the layers, we have two different ways of doing that. We can go up to Object, Arrange, and we can go Send Backward. Okay, you'll also notice on these listings, you're going to see the hotkeys or the quick commands for these. So in this case, it's Command Left Bracket, which is what I'm going to use. So I'm going to press Command Left Bracket, and you'll notice it moves it down one layer in my palette or in my Layers tab. Once we've done that, we're going to go ahead and create our next layer of mountains. And in order to do that, we're going to use a black selection tool. We're going to go ahead and click on the mountains and press Command C, Command F. We're going to go ahead and give these another color so we can make them a little bit darker. Now, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and click right here on my bounding box. You'll notice I get a split arrow pointing up and down. We're going to go ahead and click on that, and we're going to drag downward. Now, because we don't want these to look like exact copies, we're going to go ahead and mirror those. So in order to do this, we're going to go ahead and we're going to go back up to Object. We're going to go to Transform, and we're going to select Reflect. We're going to set this to 0, and we're going to select Vertical. And you'll see that it flipped the image. We're going to go ahead and click OK. So now we have our second mountain range. The next step we're going to go ahead and do in step 3 is go ahead and create our sun that's going to be in the background. So in order to do that, we're going to go ahead and click on the Shape Builder tool here, and we're going to select the ellipse. Now, if we click and hold, just like the rectangle tool, we're going to create an oval. But if we hold down our Shift key, it'll create a perfect circle. Once I've done that, I'm going to use the black selection arrow so that way I can move this shape freely around. I'm going to go ahead and assign this a color. In this case, I'm going to give it a white fill. And I'm going to use those same hotkeys to move things back in layers. So we can again use Object, Arrange, Send Backward, or we can use Command or Control Left Bracket repeatedly. Everything you build creates a new layer. So if we've created 3 objects since we made the sun, then we have to go ahead and click Command Left Bracket that many times to get it all the way back behind that last mountain range. So that'll give us our sun that we're going to have in the background. The last part of this step that we're going to do is create a gradient around the sun. So in order to do that, we're going to go ahead, we're going to click on our background shape, which we already have our color right here. And our sun, we're just using white in this case. We're going to go ahead and we're going to go up to Window. We're going to select Gradient from our dropdown. And you'll see right here is our gradients. So here's our different types. We have linear, radial, and this is called freeform. Here is the gradient bar. So when I click on this background, I'm going to go ahead, I can click on this, and you'll see my background all of a sudden becomes black and white. I have a linear gradient. We're going to go ahead and select radial. And once I've done that, I can go over here to my toolbar. This is the actual gradient tool itself. When I click on this, you're going to notice here is the center of my gradient, and here is the outside. So center, outside, and it sort of creates a glow from white to black. Now, if I click on the bar itself and hold, I can drag this gradient. Okay. I can also go to this end, click on this, and make it bigger or smaller, depending. And the other thing I'm going to go ahead and be able to do is I'm going to go over here and I'm going to grab, okay, so this was my original background color. I'm going to click and hold. I'm going to drag it, and you'll see the plus symbol appear. I'm going to create my outside to be that color. That way I can create this sort of luminescent glow I have to my sun. For step number 4, we're going to go ahead and be creating a line graph in Adobe Illustrator. To do this, we're going to go to the toolbar, and we're going to scroll down towards the bottom. You're going to see what's usually the bar graph symbol. If I click and hold, you'll be able to see here's the columns, bar graph. We're going to go ahead and select line graph for this project. So once we've selected it, we can use it a lot like the rectangle tool. We can click and drag to define the dimensions of the graph we want to create, or we can simply click once and it'll open this dialog box. And in this, we're going to go ahead and create the dimensions for our graph. We're going to make the width 9 inches, and we're going to go ahead and make our height 5 inches. Once we click OK, this will create the space that the graph is going to inhabit, and then we can plug in our data right here on this graph. So we're going to start out with 1. Our next one is going to be 3. Then we're going to plug in 15 and 30. That's going to be our last one. Press return. Once you're done, you can go ahead and click on this check mark symbol, and this will apply it to our graph, and you get to see those data points marked on our graph for us. Once we have that, all we need to do is go ahead and click on this red circle to exit out of the menu bar. Go ahead, click on the black selection tool, and we can now go ahead and move this graph around to wherever we would like it to sit as far as our project. For step number 5, we're going to be going ahead and editing our graph so we can remove any parts that we find unnecessary. In this case, we're really going to be moving this axis out so that way we can use the blue footer as the base for our graph. So the first step for this is going to be, we're going to go into what's called isolation mode. We're going to go ahead and double click on any part of our graph, and you're going to notice that the background becomes very faint. And that means we're really only working within the graph itself. So once we've done this, we're going to go ahead and ungroup our graph. So we can do that by going up to Object, Ungroup, or you can hold down Command or Control, Shift G, and that will put us in this window right here that says this selection contains a graph. After a graph is ungrouped, you will no longer be able to access its graph style, its data, or change its graph designs, which means we can't alter it once it's done. So once you're positive you have the graph you want, you can go ahead and click yes. Now, if I click off of my object, I can click on independent parts. For example, this axis we want to get rid of. We're going to go click on that, and we're going to go ahead and click delete. That will completely remove that portion. Now, once we're done, to get out of isolation mode, we just simply need to go off of our graph. It's easier if you just go off your artboard and double click outside of everything. And you'll notice the color comes back, and we still have our graph, and it's in the place we want. Now we're actually going to slide this over so we can take this piece, drag it to our right a little bit. We're going to be adding type along this side next. To do this, we're going to go ahead and be using the type tool, which if we go to our toolbar, you can see it right here, symbolized as a T. So we're going to click on that. Now, type, you can create 2 different types of typefaces. In this case, you can create a type box by clicking and holding. Or you can go ahead and just click once and begin typing whatever the word that you'd like to put in it. In this case, we're going to title this axis height in feet. So just like that. And then I'm going to go ahead and click on the black selection tool. Now I can go ahead, and because I use just click to type, I can go ahead and click and hold down my shift key, and I can increase or decrease the size of this, but it will retain the proportions. So it won't get squished like this, for example. Once I've done that, if you scroll up to the top, you guys will have your toolbar here. And like we said, this tool specific bar will reflect any options that are available for a particular tool. So in the type tool, I now have the ability to go in here and I can go ahead and change my type. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and select Arial Black. The last thing we need to do is go ahead and rotate our type and go ahead and move it into place. To do that, we're going to go ahead and click on the black selection arrow, make sure this is selected. We're going to click, or we're going to hover just around the edge of the box, and you notice you're going to get an arrow with a bend in it. We're going to click and hold. It helps if you hold down the shift key, and this will rotate in perfect 45-degree angles. And let go, and then you can go ahead and just drag it into place. And if it's too large, you can grab the corners and shrink it down to the size you'd like. And then once you set it, that's it. In step number 6, we're just going to show you how to create the saguaro, the basic shape for them. And to do that, we're going to go ahead and use the rectangle tool. So we're going to go over here. Right now it's an ellipse. If we click and hold, we'll get our other options. Here's our rectangle tool. You'll also see the hotkey here is M. So I can press key M on my keyboard, and it will go ahead and create, or it'll open up rectangle tool. So what we're going to do is click and hold from the tallest point and drag, and you're going to pick whatever thickness you really want. And then once you've selected it, we're going to go ahead and we're going to click on our white selection arrow. So direct select. We're going to go up to the very top, and we're going to click on the top right anchor point. We're going to hold the shift key and click the top left anchor point. So you can see, let me zoom in. You can click on one, hold shift, click on the other. And you see these little circles on the inside. Because these are the only two anchors that are active, these are the only two that it's going to affect. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on one of those circles, hold, and pull down to the middle, and it'll round so you have the shape of your saguaro. You from there can go ahead and change your colors, and then we'll move on to the next part. For step number 7, all we're going to be doing is taking this base of saguaro we've already created, and we're going to create 3 more by duplicating them and then altering their shape. So to do that, we're going to take the black selection arrow, select our saguaro, press Command or Control C, Command or Control V, and that'll give us a duplicate. Now what we're going to do is drag it so it's in line, and you'll see we have these quick guides that show up in hot pink. So in order to make these fit, we're going to go ahead and align the top, and then we're going to go over here and using direct select, the white selection tool, we're going to go ahead, click and drag over the 2 bottom parts, and we're going to go ahead and take these 2 anchor points, and we're going to hold the shift key. That'll help us drag in a straight line vertically until we get to the base of our footer. Now we're just going to repeat the same step 2 more times to complete the last 2. Direct select, click on one. This time I'll hold shift. So I have these both selected, and now I can simply raise them up. And one last time, and that's it for this step. For step number 8, we're going to be adding arms to our saguaros, and to do that we're going to be using the pen tool. So if we go to our toolbar and scroll down, right here you're going to see the actual pen tool. So if you hover over it, a window will pop up and show you somewhat how it works. So the pen tool itself, if you click once and click somewhere else, all it will do is give you a perfectly straight line. Whereas if I click, hold, and then drag my mouse in a direction, it will now curve that line. So we're going to go ahead, I'm going to press delete twice to get rid of this. So we're going to go to the middle of our swirl, we're going to click one time. We're going to go off to this side a little bit, we're going to click and hold, and we're going to drag up. Now we're going to go ahead, click on this anchor one more time because you can see we have what are called handles, and you'll see it automatically wants to curve. If I go back here and I click on this one more time, you'll notice I'm back to a straight line. So if I hold the Shift key, I can go ahead and click one more time just a little higher up. And now we're going to go ahead and give it width so it matches the Saguaro itself. In order to do that, we're going to go up to Window. We're going to go down and we're going to find Stroke in our palette. So in this window, more than likely your window will look like this when it pops up, where it only gives us the option to do weight. So we're going to click on these three little lines to the right and click Show Options. Now, once we've done that, weight is how thick the line is, so we can change the weight by simply clicking up, or we can click and drag and type in a number depending on if we know what it is. So in this case, I think it's about, we'll say it's 11. So there we go. Now, we have this problem of it being flat on top. Luckily, we have right here cap, and the second one in is round. So if I click on this, it will now give me a rounded arm for my Saguaro. Now to add the rest, we're going to go ahead and click on the black selection arrow. We're going to click off. We can reselect it, press Command C or Command or Control C, or Command or Control V. And now we're going to do the same thing we did with our mountain range. We're going to go ahead and reflect this. We're going to go up to Object, Transform, and we're going to select Reflect. Make sure it says Vertical. And we're going to go ahead and click OK. Now, if we grab this corner and hold the Shift key, we can make this arm a little bit smaller and then drag it into place where we want to have it. And we'll continue this throughout to finish off the rest of the Saguaros that we need. So I'll do one more, and then we'll go ahead and we'll move on to the next step. So transform, reflect, vertical, okay? So it looks like it's the same Saguaro growing over time. For step number 9, we're going to go ahead and be adding the title box at the top. To do this, we're going to go ahead and select our rounded rectangle tool. So if I click and hold right here, you're able to see a drop-down menu, and here's rounded rectangle. For rounded rectangle tool, we can either click or drag, just like the regular rectangle tool, or we can go ahead and click once. And again, we can go ahead and just plug in the information we need. In this case, we're going to put 5.5 inches for our width. We're going to go ahead and put 2 inches for our height. You'll also see in this one, we're able to put in a corner radius. So for this, we're going to put 0.25. We're going to go ahead and click OK. And this will create a rectangle that dimension. So we're going to go ahead and use the black selection arrow. We're going to be able to click and drag this over. And then we can go ahead and pick a different color for this box. So I'm going to go ahead and fill mine with this darker brown color. The next thing we're going to be able to do is go ahead and play with the opacity. So if we go all the way up here to the top of our screen, here in this tool specific bar, we can see I have this object selected, and right here is opacity. And in this opacity box, we're going to go ahead and put it at 50%. Now, if you click on it, you'll get a slider bar. So depending on what you want, that's up to you, but I like to just type it in. Okay. After that, we're going to go ahead and begin to add our type. To do this, we're going to go ahead and click on the type tool. You can type inside of the tool or the side of the box. Sometimes it'll pick it up as a shape. So if I click on the edge, you'll notice it starts to fill it as a type box instead of a rectangle tool. So if I go towards the middle, though, I can click once and I can leave my type. So I'm going to title this Stages of Life for a Saguaro. You know what? Let's go ahead and shorten this up. We're going to make this 2 different lines with 2 different types. So for this, we're going to go ahead and we'll pick a different font. So in this case, I'm going to pick Myriad Pro. Scale it a little bit by just dragging. Now I'm going to make a copy, Command C, Command V. And let's title this Saguaro. Now for this one, I will use my Arial Black font. And again, I'm going to go ahead, click and drag, just make it a little bit larger so I have a couple different type weights going on. Now, we're going to go ahead and we're going to select a new color. I'm going to go ahead and click white. And I can go ahead and center these things. Now, we haven't done this before, but because we have so many little pieces that are all fitting together, I'm going to make sure I have one of them selected, and then I'll hold the Shift key, click on my other type, and then I'll also click on my rectangle. And in order to go ahead and make sure these stay together, we're going to go ahead and hit Command or Control G, which means group. So now you'll see whenever I click off and I click back on this object, they're all selected at the exact same time. Okay, so the next thing we're going to go ahead and do is create the type boxes that exist under our Saguaros. So to do that, we're going to do the exact same steps. We're going to use rounded rectangle. We're going to go ahead and click once. And for these, we're going to go ahead and change their size to a width of 1.5 with a height of 1. Okay. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to add type again. This time we're going to go ahead and put for this 1 foot. And then I'm going to go ahead and go down a line. So just hit the return key, put 20 years. Now, because I don't like the way the font is sort of set up in here, I'm going to go ahead and click on the black selection arrow. And if I go up here to the top, here's our tool specific bar again. Up here under paragraph, we're going to go ahead and center. And now I can go ahead and add this. I'm going to hold the shift key and I'm going to increase the size. The only difference that we're going to do compared to the title box is we're going to go ahead and click on the actual rounded rectangle. And we're going to give it a drop shadow. To do that, we're going to go up to Effect. We're going to go down to Stylize, and we're going to select Drop Shadow. And here we can go ahead and change the exact specific shadows that we want to do that. In order to do that, we're going to leave our opacity at 75. We'll leave everything pretty much the same. And our color is just going to be set at a black. Just because we're going to have a bluish background, it's not going to make such a big difference. But you could go in here and actually pick a color that's very similar to one that you might have in your background already. So we're going to go ahead and click OK. Now, just like the last one, we're going to go ahead and we're going to hold the Shift key now and select our type. And then we're going to go ahead and group this. So Command or Control Shift or Command or Control G. And now, in order to duplicate it, we're just going to go ahead and repeat this 3 times. Go Command C, Command V. And you'll be able to go ahead and add another one. Command C, V. One more time, Command C, V. And so these will be the 4 different ages for the Saguaros that we were putting into our graph. So to make the rest of these, it's going to be 20, and then it's going to be 50 years. So the other 3 are going to be titled 50 years, 100 years, and 180 years. So in order to go in and edit our type, we're going to go ahead and we're going to double click. So we're going to actually use isolation mode again. So we're going to double click. And once we're inside, we can actually double click one more time. And now we're actually into our font. So this is actually going to be 3 feet at 50 years. Then we can go ahead, get our black selection or double click outside of it, go to the next one, and repeat the same process. So for this one, it is going to read 15 foot, 100 years. And then in our last one, we'll read 30 feet, 180 years. Okay, we'll double click outside of it. Now, the last thing I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to change the color of my type to match my background, just so I have some similar palette happening here. For step number 10, all I'm going to go ahead and be doing is making alterations to the design using some of the tools we've already used and then introducing a couple others. So the first thing I'm going to want to go ahead and do is when I look at this, I notice that my mountains and my title box are pretty close to each other. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to unlock my background layer. I'm going to use the black selection arrow and I'm going to click on one mountain range, hold shift and click on the second. And then because I'm not worried about the proportion, I'm going to go ahead and click here at the top of the bounding box and just drag downward to sort of flatten out my mountain range. So that way my title box has some space to breathe. So the next thing I want to go ahead and do is I'm going to finish changing all of the colors. So we're going to go ahead and, because these are already in a different color, we're going to go ahead and change these so they're all similar, and I'm going to show you another tool. It's sort of a select all for a particular color. So I'm going to go ahead and click on something that is fill color that has that navy, and I'm going to go up here to the top and go to select, same. I'm going to go to the drop down menu and say same fill color. Now, because we have both fills and then we have strokes, because the arm of the Saguaro is a stroke, you can see this red line in the middle, and you notice it didn't select because it's just the fill colors. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to assign these a new color. So I'm going to go to my color box over here in my toolbar and fill, and I'm going to double click. And here I can go ahead, I'm going to change this more towards the turquoisey green, and then I can pick a color in here anywhere that I want. So let's say this color right here. We're going to go ahead and click OK, and you'll notice anything that had the same fill color of navy is now this turquoise color. All I did here is I added that font, or not that font, that color to my swatch library. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing with stroke. So I'm going to select that arm on the Saguaro, go to select same, and this time I will use fill and stroke. Now I know it says fill and stroke, but it does not do both, we've learned. It only does either just the stroke or just the fill, depending on which one you have highlighted when you click on that. So once I've done that, I'm going to go up here, and you can see I have no fill, but I have a stroke with navy. So we're going to click on the stroke, and we're going to go ahead and click on that new color, and now we have our turquoise Saguaros. So you will notice that one of these fonts down here at the bottom must have been in navy, whereas the rest were not. So I'm going to go ahead and double click on this, and I'm going to go ahead and change it to, so let's see what happens if we got a stroke to a fill. So we're going to change it to fill, sorry, and then select navy. And I'm going to go across because that means these are all different. So we're going to go and change all these so they match. Let's see here. Just because I didn't want that to work. All right. Now, the next thing I want to go ahead and do is I'm going to apply my gradient, or a gradient, to my mountain ranges just to give them a little bit more dimension since they are so flat. So I'm going to go ahead and click on one of them. I'm going to go over to my gradient tool and make sure my fill is in front. Click on gradient. Here is the actual background color. So I'm going to be using that as my lightest color. So I'm going to click and hold, drag it onto the slider. And then I'm going to go ahead and click the original color of the mountain range. And that way I have it. So what I'm going to do now is click on the gradient tool in my toolbar. And I can click and drag in any direction. And you can see it'll change my gradient depending on the direction I'm going. So I'm just going to go straight up so I have it radiating off the bottom. And then I'm going to go ahead, click on the black selection arrow, and I'm going to apply the exact same thing. So all I'm going to do is we're going to introduce the eyedropper tool, which is going to copy any sort of effect. So we're going to click on the eyedropper. So it doesn't only copy color, but you'll also see here it's going to copy the gradient itself. So I'm going to go ahead and change those now. I'm going to use this as my lightest color, and then I'm going to add a second layer of brown. And then I'll do the same thing. I'll click on my gradient tool, click and drag. Well, in this case, I'm going to drag downward to create that change in tone. Okay. The next thing I want to go ahead and do is, because my ground is so flat, I want to give it some texture. So in order to do that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to the pencil tool. I'm going to go ahead and double click on it and change it to a real high accuracy level. So that way it follows every motion of my mouse, and I'm going to click OK because I want it to be sort of wonky and a little imperfect. And I'm just going to click and drag with some imperfections. And like I said, for most of us, this won't be a problem, but we just want to make sure we have it. So there we go. So now I've outlined it. You notice it doesn't have a fill or a stroke. I'm going to go ahead and fill it with this turquoise color. Click on my black selection arrow. And we can say that's an awful lot of texture. So instead of redoing it, what I'm going to go ahead and do is click and hold on my bounding box. I'm not going to hold the shift key so I can make it more imperfect by stretching it. And I can create a different texture to the background or the bottom there. And you'll notice over here doesn't have it. If I go all the way across, I may or may not like the way it looks. And if I don't, I can shrink it back down and then do Command CF or Command or Control CF, depending if it's a Mac or a PC, and then just drag this copied piece over, and I now have a texture that runs all the way across the bottom. So one of the next things we want to go ahead and do is I'm going to create some smaller cacti silhouettes. So to do that, I'm going to select my pencil again, and I'm just going to go ahead and create a silhouette, and then give it a fill. And now if I want to add more, I'm going to go ahead, Command C, V, and I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to go ahead and drag it over. This time I am going to hold the Shift key to scale it proportionally, and then I am going to reflect it so it's not perfectly obvious. So I'm going to go Object, Transform, select Reflect, and then I'll just make sure it's vertical, and click OK. And so there is our other little one. I'll actually probably leave it over here so it's less interfering. All right, so the last thing that's in the demo illustration is the rays on the sun. Now there's a bunch of ways to do that, so they're absolutely perfect. Under the circumstances, that's a whole bunch of other steps. So we're just going to use the pen tool, and we're going to go ahead and we're just going to create a radiating pattern. Notice I'm going back to the center, but I'm not connecting it yet. I'm going to go all the way around, so I'm going to create all my rays that are coming out of it at once. Like I said, you can always change these later on using the direct select, the white selection arrow up at the top of our toolbar. So all we're going to do is get a pattern we like the appearance of. Now, the thing that's important about this is if you look at the bottom, this is going to be in the mountain range. You'll also see that it's in front of the mountain range right now, and we'll go ahead and worry about that in just a moment. So we're going to go ahead and close this shape. So let's close this shape. And now we're going to use that eyedropper tool one more time, and we're going to click on our background. And we're going to go and select gradient. We're going to go to the middle. And this time we're going to drag our slider a little bit further out. So that way it creates that overtone of those rays on that sun. So we're going to go ahead and click on the black selection arrow. And now we're going to use the Command left bracket to move it down in layers until it's below our actual sun. And now you can see we have this hint of rays coming out of that sun. And that's it for this demonstration of Illustrator.